religion and culture is like a tree without roots. That's what Marcus Garvey said. Joan Rivers said something a bit lighter. Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery, today's a gift from God. That's why we call it the present. Yours truly, Avi Klein, states that while a library is a delivery room for the birth of ideas, here on Wrestling with History with Stevie Ray, we put down the pacifier because our words, heck, they're already grown up from the womb. While we say what we mean and mean what we say, we don't say it mean unless you're part of the machine. And if you find it hard to laugh at yourselves, don't worry. We'll be happy to do it for you, so stick around, because we move faster than a George W. Bush press conference and a Cardi B money grab, yet a bit slower than a Hillary Clinton campaign trail and an Israeli prime minister election. So what's going on, Stevie?
Brother, I am just hanging.
That's a good thing. I mean, you recently came back from New York. How was that? You ended up picking up an equal amount of bed bugs and memories on your way back home, or just...
Man, I tell you what I picked up, to be honest, what I picked up was a lot of work. 5 days, that's what I picked up, a lot of work. And brother, I couldn't sleep straight when I got back home to Houston, Texas.
You tell me you came down to New York. Here you are. Here's, a weekend where you're being honored, which is a nice gesture, of course, and a well-deserved gesture. And you're coming back to Houston with more work on your lap.
Well, hey, man, work never stops, man. And I didn't anticipate how much work I was going to be doing, so it kind of threw me off a little bit. But, hey, man, I'm back in the real world now, and I'm ready to go.
What's more, getting honored and kind of like not putting forth the work? What I'm saying is, if it's somebody's weekend, I guess what a lot of people don't realize is there's a lot of work that goes behind it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, a lot of work, man. It goes in behind the scenes that people don't see. So it caught me off guard, but it is what it is.
I'm a New York raised guy, but in other parts of the country, couples try to stay together for the sake of the children. In New York, they try to work things out for the sake of the apartment, Stevie.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I really have.
Talking about broom closets. A lot of guys don't realize this. If you want to move to New York City, live in Manhattan, you're probably going to get a broom closet. If you're okay with that, no problem if you're a minimalist.
Hey, man, New York is a very expensive place to live, man. Very expensive place to live.
Yeah, that's quite an understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, between three places, I think the most expensive, I don't know, maybe San Francisco, LA, New York. You might throw Chicago in there.
So for you, let me ask you a question. If you were let's say you weren't in a position where, and again, we're not talking about someone's finances. That's not something we do over here. But this is episode 2 of Wrestling, with History with Stevie Ray. And if you were in a position where you weren't necessarily working or thriving when you were in WCW and making some money there, if you kind of had like an average salary, $50,000 a year, would your goal to be to live above your means? In a sense,
I don't think I would want to live above my means, regardless what my occupation is.
Yeah.
Really and truly, that comes from your upbringing and not worshiping material things. Because a lot of people, I believe, whenever you come into a substantial amount of income, first thing to do is to go out and buy things.
Right.
Especially if you've been deprived of a lot of material things.
Sure.
As a youth coming up. So you see that, today you see guys that get drafted in the NBA and NFL, baseball, whatever, some of these sports. And a lot of these kids have never had any kind of substantial wealth in their life or ever, upper middle class, affluent, or anything like that. And the next thing you know, they're buying things because, hey, I got the money. The only thing I know is buy. Whereas they've never been educated. They've never been educated on money, and that's kind of unfortunate. But a lot of that comes up with your upbringing, man. My daughter, back when I was making, a substantial amount of money, my daughter, first thing when she got to a certain age is, brother, baby, we don't try to keep up with the Joneses. And we don't buy things just because your dad can afford them.
Sure.
So,
in a sense, the economic... There have been about 4 or 5 in the last century legitimate economic crises that took place in the U.S. And you would think from a parental standpoint, since it comes, again, not to sound preachy, but as a parent, I think the goal is to educate children on pretty much valuing a dollar. And at this point, it seems that, I guess, celebrities have much more of a reach towards the young demographic of audience members.
But you got to realize something. AB. Sometimes parents don't even know anything about educating the kids toward money.
You're right.
So So it's not passed down from generation to generation, depending on what your background is, where you come from.
So what you think is it's kind of a vicious cycle sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Because if the only thing you know is to steal, rob, and things like that to have, that's all you're going to want to do, because in your world, you think that's normal, because that's all you came up around. I brought my daughter up around, when I was a kid, I never went to a bank, things like that. I never went to see my parents do business or whatever, and things like that. They kept the kids away from things like that. Whereas in other families, they want their kids around when they go to the bank or doing business and see. They just want to subliminally want these kids to see your dad work hard, and this is what he has to do that. So it's passed down, subliminally, it's inside them, and they don't even know it. So when they get to a certain...
But to play devil's advocate, that's what's interesting about these conversations. Someone has to do it. I want to play devil's advocate. If a parent pretty much tells their children, look, we're going to include you in every step of the process. We're going to spoil the hell out of you. We're going to make sure that you're going to have what we didn't have times a million. To play devil's advocate, in terms of just having the passion, or at least having their mind, or their mind in the wrong place, but the heart in the right place. I think if you have to have one parent, a parental figure that disagrees with the other, that's the challenge. I think right now the parental units feel like, because there's such an emphasis on divorces and divorce rates are climbing through the roof, I feel like a lot of times parents are tiptoeing because of their children, and staying on the same page is becoming sort of a universal problem, at least in the States. That's what it seems like, statistically speaking.
I think that's true, because the disciplinarians that my parents were are not the disciplinarians of today.
No.
Now I think a lot of people want to be friends with their kids, and that's why I was saying I took the approach of what I know, and then added some to that. And now my daughter, who just returned from Japan, actually 2 days ago, one thing I always told her was that, hey, you're young, do young people things. Enjoy your youth.
Sure.
She went to college, she graduated, and now she's going through that transition period, I spent all these years in college. Now I'm out of college, and even though I'm working a pretty good job, I want to do some things and see some things, and that's what I wanted to do. Instead of, some kids come up, especially in my community, hey, go get a husband. That's the first thing you need to do.
Right.
And I didn't want her to be in it. Hey, this is a different world, and I think, I was looking at how the world is changing, and I want to change with it. And I want my daughter to change with it.
That's conducive. I mean, it's a very conducive approach that you have. I think it's beneficial, especially when it comes from a parent that maybe in your case has seen the world and he's been there and he's done that. A lot of times kids, when they grow up, they kind of see their parents as the human beings they are, whereas they're superheroes when they're children. And when you get older, you start really kind of sizing up your parents. And whether, in my opinion, an occupation doesn't define who somebody is. But when you're in that weird transitional stage where you're into your early 20s, you're still kind of influenced by power and by travel and by the high life, thinking that that's something that's within reach. And you look at your parents to see what did they accomplish. So I guess in your sense, I find that to be a very grounded approach that you're giving her, because certainly you've been around and you've tasted the life, you've seen countries, you have a lot of stories to tell. It's very conducive advice, I think, that you're giving her, just from what it sounds like.
Well, not only that, Avi, coming from the African American community, and I am one to look at the images that's portrayed on a daily basis by our mainstream media.
Sure.
By when it's pertaining to the African American community. My daughter is African American. She went to school with African American kids. The schools she went to had every race, religion, and creed of kids in it. But be that as it may, certain images these days takes precedent to what you're actually trying to teach your kids. Because nowadays you got two parents working, or you might live in a single parent home, and the images sometimes are stronger than what the parents are teaching.
Right.
So now you're relying on the school to teach them. The school is not teaching certain things. School is trying to teach, the lessons to get them ahead, so on and so forth. It's not teaching them things about culturally.
They're also trying to teach their teachers how to teach.
So at the end of the day, what I did as a child was any negative images didn't come on my television. Because it's an uphill battle. Okay, when you take certain corporate entities that hijack what we look at as an African American TV station and turn it into garbage, and we're supposed to buy this garbage because it keeps us eating garbage. I didn't want to do that.
What you're saying is the mentality is to just, in terms of the African Americans, is the mentality from up top is say, hey, you know what? From an entertainment standpoint or from even a social justice standpoint, let's keep a group of people in line. Let's keep them in check.
Well, the thing is,
it's a form of brainwashing and propaganda as well.
If you start to emulate what you see, if you see movies that talk about gang stuff all the time, if you listen to music that talks about, anything that's some kind of inverted way of thinking,
sure.
magazines, reality shows, so on and so forth, that are so, I don't even know the words for some of these things, but, they're super dysfunctional.
Yes.
Now, what's wrong becomes right. And what's right is pretty much thrown out the window.
Right, exactly.
So when people do things like that and start to try to emulate them, if the only thing I know is selling drugs, drinking alcohol, and the next thing is a party, when it comes to the African American black, as from where I'm from, that's not true. But if you see it, pretty much put on people's heads that's growing up from young ages on a daily basis, then the parents start to buying it too. So what are you doing? You're taking dysfunctionality and passing it back down to dysfunctionality.
It's a great point. You and I off the podcast were talking about something, and I mentioned how people often talk about Selma, Birmingham, Montgomery, but the incubator for the civil rights movement, the actual incubator, was Nashville. James Lawson is a guy who gets lost in history, an African American leader who actually was an amazing teacher. He's taught his class about nonviolence approaches. He picked it up from Gandhi's teaching. There's so many great depictions of African Americans in terms of just being able to research and study something is a great gift. Don't get me wrong. But I don't think it should be something that is far beyond people's reach. It saddens me that when you mention someone like James Lawson, that people have to actually dig and research and find out who he is. Because I don't necessarily blame the individual who doesn't know who he is, the masses who may not have heard of his name. I blame the system in the sense that he shouldn't be someone who's so far within our reach or within our scope that we have to actually dig to find out his story. It's sad. It's really sad. There's a lot of... Yeah.
No, not to cut you off. There's a lot of people that's gotten lost in the shuffle. But more important than that, the struggle itself has been lost.
What do you mean by that? Okay, what do you mean by the struggle itself has been lost?
Okay, the struggle itself has been lost. You talk about James Lawson and what he stood for, and how he had taken some of the systematic ways of dealing with oppression from Mahatma Gandhi.
Sure.
Okay. Well, a lot of people, when it comes to Mahatma Gandhi, was one of the biggest racists in the world.
Oh, he actually condoned Adolf Hitler, by the way. People don't understand this. He backed Adolf Hitler and his principles, which is true.
Okay, but be that as it may, he was being oppressed by the British. So I can understand that. I can understand his plight for his people. Okay.
Martin Luther King is that bomb that we just dropped. Gandhi, who was actually universally applauded for his message of peace, backed, agreed, and wrote letters, very positive letters, to Adolf Hitler at its very height in 1941. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who had a great rapport with Adolf Hitler and was considered a friend. It's the history, it's the mystery of history. That's why I always say, in a way, ignorance is bliss for most people, but for those who actually seek and yearn knowledge, it can become a bit of a task to uncover the truth. Is it worth it? Sure, but it's a task.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, these are some of the things that don't get, talked about.
Sure.
And like I said, you was talking about the individual that hasn't gotten lost in the shuffle. But just the whole movement, has died. The whole movement, in a lot of ways, people don't even know anything about. Now,
I have an opinion about that. It can't thrive in a capitalist system. And if you play devil's advocate, I would love to hear that on your take if you disagree. Because if you agree, great. But if you don't, I want to hear your argument about that. I don't think it can thrive in a capitalist system.
When you take away the very things that made the movement thrive.
Right.
What are those things?
Tell me.
Firstly, newspapers.
Right.
Secondly, radio. Thirdly, just underground networking with each other. Those are the very things that's gone now from the African American community.
Why?
Well, first of all, most radio stations have been bought up by the big corporations.
Mm-hmm. Right.
What I'm talking about is the African American radio station, not the African American radio station that's owned by a corporation. Mm-hmm. You got to realize, back in these days, radio stations were owned by black people.
Right.
A lot of the stores were owned by black people. The newspapers. So we did our own networking with each other. Well, you come around to the late 60s, early 70s, everybody wants to be like the white guy. And I'm not saying anything wrong with that. Being like the white guy and having what the white guy there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to be the white guy.
Again, it goes back to...
I don't want to be the white guy. I don't want to be the white guy, and I basically don't even want to live with him. That's how they thought back then. I want to live like him. If I want to buy a house in his neighborhood, I should be able to do that. But I don't want to.
But that piggybacks on what I said. That in essence, what they want to do is thrive like the white man, or the way the white man did in this analogy, which means that under a capitalist regime, if you think about it in terms of just from an idealistic standpoint, that means that because of the fact that we live in a capitalist society and always have, not always, but in the last 150 years we have, then that takes away everything that you just said, in the sense that how can people differentiate between what their goals are when they're all linked to monetary value?
There you go.
That's the problem.
The thing is, take away from a people, you have to take away the resources. You got to take away the banks. You got to take away the banks.
Yes.
You got to take away medical facilities. You got to take away even grocery facilities.
Right.
Because these are some of the things a community needs to thrive.
Sure.
Everybody else has them except for us. But we used to have them. But we don't anymore. So now they can control us not by what we control, but from their controls, and use us to do it.
I agree with that.
I have a problem with that.
I agree with that. And you should. I mean, and you should, from if you talk about the mass scale, if you want to talk about generalizing, I don't think you are, because a lot of people, again, they look at big cities as examples. They point at big cities and they say, well, let's use that as a model. And if that model serves as an example of exactly whether or not a community thrives, it fails to deliver, because if you think about it, how many big cities do we really have in this country?
In this country?
Six or seven.
A good, I would say maybe 10 total.
The reason I said 6 or 7 is because, from a mass scale point of view,
you could be right. You could be right.
If you're thinking all cylinders from a monetary standpoint, from a corporate standpoint, from an economic standpoint, and from a population standpoint, about 6 or 7. So I'm agreeing with you, because in my opinion, if you're looking at 6 or 7 cities as an example, and even those 6 or 7 cities that are thriving have inner city issues, if you will, you can never use a big city as an example of what's going on in rural America, ever.
Exactly.
Ever.
Exactly. So, even down to education now, you know what I'm saying? But the thing is, once that stops, and then you start to tear down the African-American family, then, hey, you got them. Because now you can sell them anything.
Right.
Because you got to realize something. A lot of people don't realize this. And I work with Houston Community College here in town.
Yep.
And I was doing a lecture on something similar to this. Whereas I had to do my studying on some things that I didn't understand, because the Houston Community College has just built a year ago a new trade facility, a facility that's going to be teaching a lot of the kid trades. And I didn't realize that trades had been taken out of school. Like when I went to school, Avery, do you know you could learn a trade in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. My father did. Yep.
Okay. And long as you got a trade, okay, you can eat.
Absolutely. What happened to the locksmith? What happened to the mechanic?
Exactly. Because the school, all that's been taken out of schools, especially the African American schools.
Sure.
You know, back when I was coming up, you know, the African American family could actually live comfortably on one person working in the house.
Absolutely. Single income households in the African American community up until 1967 were thriving.
Right, exactly. Because you know what? They worked at the factories.
Yep. Absolutely. They had a secure. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. They had small businesses.
Yep.
You know. So when all that changed in the late 60s and early 70s, slowly but surely, it started to eradicate the African American family.
From a morale standpoint, they weren't exactly. They really didn't have any reason, if you think about it, to feel a sense of being invigorated. Because, as you mentioned, if you look at historically how African Americans were treated here, that boom period didn't last too long.
Right. Or it was systematically stopped.
Absolutely right about that.
But be that as it may, that is when things started to change.
Sure.
So the trades have been taken out of schools by the, late 70s, early 80s, things of that nature. I mean, a female could go to learn how to be a cosmetologist, like you said, mechanics, plumbing, things of that nature. Whereas they could go out and go to a regular trade school and learn the rest of it and be doing what they do and making a living by the age of 20 years old, 19 maybe.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
And so all that's been lost. All that's been like pouring dirt over. So you close down all the factories around the country. You know what I'm saying? Even the car factories have been closing down at an alarming rate. So then you take education. Okay, back in those days, people went to college because everybody else went to college because it was a thing to do. Everybody wanted education.
Absolutely.
Education was good. Everybody thrived it. You know what I'm saying? Education was good. Everybody went to go to school if they had, or they get a trade and start working, and you give back to your community.
Think about African Americans in the 1970s. When people asked, did they scale the job ladder? Statistically, this is in the public domain. More blacks obtained white-collar jobs, but fewer penetrated higher salary jobs.
Right. So
there was mobility in blue-collar jobs, which was impressive, but it was a far cry from the mid-'60s to the late '60s.
In essence, what I'm saying is this. When you went to get a degree, you used that degree to help others like you.
Sure.
Now it's totally different. You use that degree to help others that don't look like you.
Right, exactly.
And all the jobs as far as trades are gone. Nobody don't even know what the word trade means anymore. So then you get to an era of the early 80s where, hey, drugs and guns are dumped into neighborhoods.
Sure.
Drugs and guns are dumped into neighborhoods, and people act like they don't know how they got there.
And then it goes back to what you said. When craft trades were the thing of a norm, and it transitioned to service work that employed more black men than any other occupation, again, from a morale standpoint, where's the reason to feel ambitious? Where's the reason to feel like you're going somewhere?
Exactly. So you've taken everything from me systematically.
Yes, exactly.
So
Systematically.
the family, the first thing that happens, the family breaks down.
Absolutely.
When the family breaks down, what do you have? You have anarchy in a community. Whereas we've been trying so long to be like you.
It's well said.
Now we want to be you.
That's well said.
So if we want to be you, who do we hate each other?
I like that you took the proper steps gradually to actually explain where we came. This came from somewhere, people. Anyone listening, you got to understand something, that this doesn't just fall on top of a community or as a society overnight. There are reasons for this. There's gradual buildups. And then what we're talking about, I'm glad that you're actually taking it back to when the root of the problem was, which was in the mid to late 60s. That's when it started evolving. I don't think morale right now is a low point. I think that the ability to use the media as well, to use propaganda towards any ethnic group,
right,
probably more powerful than it's been.
Most definitely.
I would actually put it on par with the Nazi Germany propaganda machine that was probably the strongest. I mean, the propaganda machine is running really strong. society.
It is today, man, and it's today, and it's not just us. And that's why I try to make people understand you're a part of this too, and you just don't know it. You think it's all on us, but people don't understand. We are one thing, and I've talked to you about this before, about getting a piece of the pie in this country. At the end of the day, everybody wants their piece of the pie. But what people don't understand is profit in poverty.
Right.
It's profit in poverty. If you look at some of the legislation that was laid down in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when people were coming over to this country, AV.
Sure.
They wanted their piece of the pie. The Polish, the Irish, the Germans, the whatever European country known to man that were coming here. They only made legislation to keep the African Americans out of it.
Absolutely.
That's proven, is documented. Anybody can look it up.
Look, if you want, let's go further. 1790 was the Naturalization Act of 1790, which established the rules for naturalized citizenship. But African Americans obviously weren't in the equation when you think about that. So people might go, well, okay, let's talk about anything post-Civil War. Fine, we could talk about most post-Civil War. How about the United States? If you think about the Immigration Act of 1903, even anarchists were giving more rights. Anarchists. And this is 1903. This is 1903, where anarchy was actually still, it was as close to home as terror is today in the U.S. That's how big a deal anarchy was back then.
But even the Declaration of Independence, Bill of Rights, everything else that's been written, if you really read between the lines, and a lot of people, I don't know, they might not agree with me. I really, truly, it is. But at the end of the day, if you really think about it, are African American citizens or are they a resident? It's a big difference.
Sure. I agree with that. How do you differentiate that? I agree.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a constitutionalist.
Right.
But I would just like people to think about that.
Well, think of it this. In terms of, I don't know if this was Kwang Hae Chu, which was an Asian from 1953. I remember actually, it's funny you mentioned this. I delved into this last week with my students. The Supreme Court found the Bill of Rights is a futile authority for the aliens seeking admission for the first time. Okay. And right there, they're admitting that the Bill of Rights is a futile authority, meaning that don't look to the Bill of Rights. That's why the contradictory statement, if you want to look at political cartoonists, they would always refer to it as the Bill of Wrongs. Because if you're looking to the if you're looking to the Bill of Rights as your crutch, you might as well be handicapped already.
Unbelievable,
right? Isn't it?
Very unbelievable. Yeah,
it's crazy. Get this, Stevie. This is an interesting that happened, and this is far from what we're talking about. We'll delve into that more, but it's of the utmost importance. But some interesting things happened just in terms of levity. I actually looked at some articles that were passed on by my manager earlier, and an unannounced visit to a PetSmart store from a camel took place yesterday.
What was that?
You realize that from a pet? I don't know where this was. Where was this? I'm asking. Was it Connecticut? There was a PetSmart store, and a camel just kind of walked in. A camel. I didn't say a dog. I said a camel.
You know what? I think when I was in New York this past weekend. And I was watching something in my hotel room, and I seen a guy bring in an animal, but I can't remember what it was. That might be what you're talking about, and everybody was looking at the guy.
Guys, if you want, I'm just laughing because I'm imagining Stevie Ray looking, the reason's bad, he's watching TV and he sees a camel just walking through a PetSmart.
Oh, my
your expression of being dumbfounded,
hey, man, it might have, It might have been Hump Day, It might have been
Wednesday. You know what's funny? A lot of people are in arms about this, but in my opinion, the camel's on the right track. He had some money to spare, got some bucks together, figured he'd change his diet. Or maybe, I shouldn't say he or her. Maybe it's a her. I don't want to offend anyone and leave a gender out of this because God knows how that would be perceived, right? But if the camel decides to frequent the PetSmart, maybe I think he had a budget in place because he didn't pick anything off the shelf, so he might have been a piggy buyer. But I've always said that peace amongst animals in the wild would occur if we just built some damn supermarkets in the wilderness. Give him a Walmart, give him a Stop and Shop, give him something.
Hey, I don't think it's anything. I don't think it's any signs up there saying certain pets are not allowed. It just says pets.
It just says pets. If the camel wants to walk in there, so be it. I got nothing against that.
So that means if I had Godzilla on a leash, I could bring him in there, you know?
In Washington, D.C., and don't worry because we haven't even begun to open up our can of worms on that place. But all in due time, we will. But in Washington, D.C., a man is locked out of his iPad for 48 years due to the fact that his 3-year-old toddler took many attempts at guessing his password. His iPad was locked out for 48 years because his kid took several attempts at guessing what his password was. 48 years. Wow. What the hell is that?
Then buy another one. You know, buy another one.
But I did some math, though. I'm not a math teacher, but I did some math. So, like, in 48 years, we'll be in the year 2067. That means that in the year 2067, Stevie, this particular iPad will be released from its locked state. If that iPad has eyes, I think here's some of the things that he'll see in the year 2067. I think that in the year 2067, the New York Knicks will continue their streak of improving their annual regular season record and finally reach the playoffs, only to be swept in the first round and miss the playoffs for the next 48 years. That's what I think.
I think that iPad won't see anything.
No? Who knows? I mean, technology.
If that iPad opens up, the networks will be all the networks, streaming networks will be so far advanced that thing wouldn't be able to connect to anything. You know,
that's actually a good point. We're talking about the year 2067, but in the year 2067, Stevie, Henry Kissinger,
your iPad, your iPad will be embedded in your eye. You know what I'm saying? And you'll be able to connect to it through your brain.
It's a legitimate iPad, right? A legitimate.
Yeah. You connect to it through your brain, you know, by just hitting something and thinking up our pad word. You know, nobody will be able to get to it now.
In the year 2067, Henry Kissinger is going to reveal to us that he's made up of cyber tissue. And his reason for being created was to gradually suck the life force out of every human being, along with his monotone voice. And he decides to appoint the last human being alive as president of Earth, that being Dick Cheney. They're still alive.
That ain't going to happen. Henry Kissinger might be alive. Henry Kissinger might be alive, but that bionic heart of Dick Cheney is on its way out in a few.
Do you think sort of when you go into Henry Kissinger's office, he's always like pointing people in that monotone voice and telling them, I won the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't know if you guys knew that or if you're aware of that. Like, you think he always draws attention to it? He was like one of the most least likely guys to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Insane, isn't it?
Hey, brother, must have been something connected to it.
Oh,
did he get the Nobel Prize for going over to China?
Building relations during the Nixon administration.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You remember they were trying to, I don't know, him and Nixon was trying to get next to China.
I think he said that Richard Nixon brought back peace relations with China because God knows JFK didn't do that. He actually did. The problem was he got assassinated. China only moved in favor of a communist regime following the USSR because of the fact that they looked at America fundamentally as a very weakened state. They looked at America and the U.S. as a very weakened state. They felt as if the inner turmoil and all the foreign policy going on in the early 60s with people always talk about Vietnam, but what they forget about is Cuba. What they forget about is, obviously, if you want to talk about Algeria and what happened there, we could talk there, we could talk Grenada. There were so many foreign policy issues that it was insane. And China felt like the USSR was in a much more tangible position. Especially when you look geographically at how they could be protected a lot easier by the USSR machine than the U.S., geographically speaking.
Yeah, especially when now you're next to a country like Japan that's attacked you I don't know how many times.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, right, exactly. But if this
where did those guys learn that kind of aggression from? We're not going to even go there.
No, we will eventually. But, Steve, in the year 2067, Angelina Jolie's adopted children will have created a rainbow party of government due to their diverse backgrounds, only to be challenged by another new party of government called the BBDW, otherwise known as the Blonde Bimbo Daughters of Wealth, which will be run by both Paris Hilton and Ivanka Trump's great-great-granddaughters.
That I can believe. You know what I'm saying? That I can believe. That is what the world is.
Okay.
That is what the world is gravitating to. When people like that, Kim Kardashian, is talking about doing it. talking about being an attorney, man. You got to be joking, but hey, I'm with it because that's where the world is going, brother.
I'm telling you, BBDW. By the way, subsequently, Trump's ghost during that time, he'll haunt the new rainbow government by insisting that his orange hair qualifies him automatically as a member.
Hey, man, I don't think you should be talking about Donald Trump's orange hair like that.
Why? It's an easy
what has his orange hair ever done to you?
Nothing, you're right.
His orange hair has never done anything to you. I think the man is very colorful. I think it's good. I think it's great.
You like his hair? You're a fan of his hair?
I don't think you should call his hair orange because it's not 100% orange.
What is it then? What color is his hair, Stevie?
Well, I don't know all the colors in the rainbow, man, but you know, it's not 100% orange. It might be close to orange, but I don't think you should do that. I don't think you should talk about our president like that. That's our president. You talking about him like that, man.
Yeah, how dare I? I know, he might shut us down. Finally, in 2067, finally, the Me Too era in the year 2067 will still be surging, but has now become a matter of gender reversal, as men are calling for gender equality on their behalf, as they're no longer allowed to flirt, smile, look, or breathe at women. The severe punishment for committing one of these offenses for men is to be forced to 2 years of uninterrupted airings of The View, washing the toilets of Melissa McCarthy's great-grandchildren, and keeping a daily log of the number of rafts available made up of the Kardashians' artificial body parts.
I think in 2067, the Me Too movement will be talking about themselves.
What do you mean? Tell me.
I think the Me Too movement will split off into two factions.
Right.
And it'll be Me Too against Me Too, too.
Me Too against Me Too, too. I like that. You heard about what Trump said? Speaking of him, he said that there's something like, I found this out, this actually got announced yesterday. So this is something current, this is actually legitimate, I'm not kidding. A new military troop policy takes effect that warrants intergender troops in the military the right to serve, as long as it's for the gender that they were born into. I'm serious about this.
Wow. You know what gets me?
Tell me.
When it comes to the military, why is that so taboo?
About what? The whole intergender, like the gay thing, the intergender? Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Why is that?
Do they think that, like, soldiers who are gay are going to just, like, stop firing at the enemy and because they're looking at their attractive platoon members? And
okay,
I'm with you. I don't understand that either.
Let's get serious here.
Yeah.
First of all, slowly but surely, you talk about 2067. Slowly but surely, the soldier is not even going to be needed anymore. So I'm trying to figure out why are the military tripping on something like this. This is just old-fashioned mentality that just doesn't want to leave. Because at the end of the day, okay, we've already conjured up a opponent by the name of a terrorist. We got to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars to fight a terrorist. Even when there's no terrorists out there to fight, they're telling us we got to fight the terrorists.
We always had a boogeyman, Stevie. We always had a boogeyman.
Oh, that's my point.
Right.
So what difference do it make what the soldier looks like or what he is, as long as he's in a uniform and he can pick up a gun and go do what he's supposed to do?
I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I'm not, I agree with you 100% on that. If I didn't, I agree with that.
Let me get to this. If we were fighting a real country,
right
now, I read that a summit meeting was held in 1945.
Okay.
While all the major wasn't even covered by the media. While all the major countries in the world after World War II got together and see how we're going to pretty much split up all of Europe, okay?
Of course.
And the Middle East and so on and so forth. Okay.
You're talking about the wartime conferences. Yep.
Okay. Also, I can't remember the name of it. Also, what was pretty much chronicled at this event that no no major countries would ever go to war against each other anymore.
Okay, so the Potsdam Conference in '45, it featured the Big Three back then. And no, by the way, to listeners who are listening,
this one, the one I'm talking about,
Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh. The Big Three was
the one I'm talking about had Mao Zedong and Deng Kai-shek at the same one.
Yes. Yep.
And they were having a civil war against each other in China. I'm not talking about the Big Three. I don't know exactly what they called it. Okay, but this took place. Only one newspaper talked about it. I think it was like the Washington Times or something like that back in the day. That's how this went down. But be that as it may, also that was discussed. No major countries would ever go to war against each other anymore. Now, since 1945, no major country has never had a fight with each other anymore.
Okay, I just want to explain. The Chino-Soviet Convention is what you're referring to. And Stalin was there as well. And that's one of the reasons why he made his pitch, his campaign. He realized, if you think about it, a lot of people don't understand why when you fast forward to North Vietnam being able to just withstand such a long war. They don't understand that they were actually financed by not only the USSR, and by the way, it was Brezhnev back then, so I mean, this isn't during Stalin's days, but in North Vietnam, when the war was going full effect, the USSR and China were funding it in terms of arms and from a monetary standpoint as well.
Right.
So everybody that was something that wasn't covered a lot. A lot of people didn't even know that. Even U.S. intelligence, a lot of U.S. intelligence weren't even aware about it till probably about a year later.
Right.
You're right.
You're right. So with all that being said, and we're making a big thing about certain genders in the army. Really? You ain't gonna fight nobody. You ain't gonna fight nobody anyway. Who you gonna fight?
What's the bigger issue, though, Stevie? Is it the gender thing? Is it the sexual preference thing about, who's qualified to fight for the Army here in the States? What's the biggest, not what the biggest taboo is. What bothers you the most?
I'll tell you the deal is, I think when it comes to party lines, you got to stay in your lane, man. If you are conservative, you got to stay with conservative versions. You can't go outside it.
Sure.
And if that's what they preach, that's what they preach. If I'm in the Army,
due to fear?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
I agree.
Or make people, I'm like, if I'm fighting a war, I want every single solitary body that I can get.
Yes.
That wants to join this thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Instead of making everything political. The world is changing.
So what you said, are we past, and we're not, obviously, but shouldn't we be past separation? That's why when you talk about the most ironic thing about our country is right under our nose. The name of it, the United States.
Right.
There's nothing united about it.
Come on, man. When you have a country like this, I actually believe.
I'm looking at my sponsor. We're going to keep talking about this. It's okay. Go ahead, Stevie. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the most unique country in the world, but it doesn't want to be.
No, it doesn't. No.
When you have something nobody else has, instead of rubbing it in the whole world's face, doesn't want to be.
Right. And it's funny because the same people who claim to fight for the amazing factoid about why we're so united, and again, the same people who argue about why we're united when we're not are the people that are dividing us. So the people who are content, if you look at even third world countries, you'll find that they live healthier and longer lives. You find that they live more well-balanced lives, despite the fact that they have minimal resources. Agriculture may be their only resource in some of these countries.
Right. But you know something they have that we don't have?
What's that?
Everyday stress.
Right. Right. That's true, too. Yep.
They know what they are, and they're content with it.
They are. And in a way, it's not even stress anymore, because when you're used to a certain lifestyle, and that's all you know, you don't associate that with being stressful.
Right.
So I agree.
That is why I go back to when I was talking about the movement of the 50s and 60s. Then you wanted to become just like your oppressor.
Right. Right.
Now you understand what I'm saying?
Oh, I always did, and I agree.
Once you became, you know what I'm saying, your oppressor, he's got you.
Sure. It's a vicious cycle. It really is. It's a vicious cycle.
He's got you because now you just ventured into a world that you can't sustain.
Right. Do you feel like right now the problem with lawmakers and a lot of young politicians as well that want to make a difference, what I think the issue that they don't understand is if you're going to hang your hat on a law, Martin Luther King said it best. He doesn't adhere to breaking the law, but when the law is unjustified in terms of being a law to begin with, how can you serve it and obey it?
That's true. It's just like let's say, a crack house in the middle of the hood.
Right.
That the police won't do anything about. And we are afraid, all these families and people around this crack house, everybody knows what it is. But, the city government doesn't do anything. So then what do you result to? Vigilante action. Because you're trying to protect where you live.
But the word is necessity.
Then,
right.
Then you just broke the law. But the law wasn't there for me to begin with.
Why should you be there for it?
Exactly.
No, I get you. I completely understand you. So from a grassroots movement, if you're thinking about people that actually want to make a difference, the interesting thing about the plight of the African American is that, especially in the States, is that when there were peaceful protests, and it didn't necessarily work. There were peaceful approaches, and we talked about Lawson earlier. But there were very peaceful demonstrations that occurred that, at least from the African-American side of things, violence wasn't something that represented or came out of. They realized that there's a system in place that they're going to use. Civil obedience. Civil disobedience didn't occur until later on. But nobody shines the spotlight on the fact that there was a lot of civil obedience on African-Americans' part, a lot of patience, a lot of due diligence. And it's never covered. It's because the narrative, not just through the media, but through the public in general, even when the media wasn't exactly as widespread as it is today, the public in general have always feared what they perceive as being a boogeyman. Because change is the one thing that scares people. God forbid change comes knocking on your door and says, hey, how are you? God forbid.
I mean, when J. Edgar Hoover says that Martin Luther King is the most dangerous man in America, what does he mean by that?
To him, he is. To him, he is. I mean, if you think about J. Edgar Hoover, they were probing Martin Luther King Jr. in the late 50s.
Most definitely. But I'm just saying, this man is the most dangerous, the most dangerous man. I mean, this is unreal, bro. The most dangerous man to America and its freedoms. That's unreal.
Considered dangerous. Someone who doesn't sit at the table and say, thank you for giving me a nice meal and some water, then sure, that's what you want to call it.
And this is a man who politicians didn't even like.
No, they didn't.
This is a man that would not even acknowledge that the mob existed.
That's right.
This is a man that was a cross-dressing homosexual. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, but at least, don't act as though, come out the closet like everybody else. Right. But you come down on the gay people at the same time, at that same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're gay and you come down on them. Sure. And you're taking kickbacks from the mob because they all got knowledge and probably got your own pictures doing what you do with Clyde Tolson.
He was in their back pocket.
In essence, this man is a traitor.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about
there's a law, you are a traitor.
Yeah. You're talking about
that should be brought up on charges.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That you were working with the mob. But you call Martin Luther King the most dangerous man in America.
So interesting.
Please, somebody let me understand that.
So, in essence, if you think about it, when you want to shine a positive light, you'll say, well, he led the FBI's campaigns against interstate crime for almost 50 years, but the kickbacks he received were incredible.
Exactly.
The kickbacks he received were incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about privacy violations, there's a whole document of cases that we can talk about.
He invented it.
Sure he did. He sure did. He sure did.
He invented it.
He absolutely was.
You know, he's the main guy that JFK was going to get rid of. He knew his day was coming.
Absolutely.
He knew it.
He wasn't, I mean, if you think about some of the probes that not only he gathered on JFK, but Robert Kennedy as well. People always, they don't talk about Robert Kennedy. They don't realize that in 1968, Robert Kennedy was probably going to win.
Most definitely.
And I'm not just talking about the Democratic race. I'm talking about he was going to be the next commander-in-chief.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And all those guys in the early 60s knew it.
Absolutely.
And you know
there's one thing they all had in common. Robert and John, a lot of people talk about their mob ties. A lot of people talk about kickbacks. But what they don't understand is that there's one machine you can't fight. That's the Central Intelligence Agency. And when you decide to be a president, we probably only had 3 presidents that have been against, and I even shouldn't say against, but very weary of military guidance. Both Kennedys were very leery of it. And when you don't take military guidance and you sort of have your own ideological stance and go against what the military advises you, here in this country, that's a big no-no if you're the president.
You're in trouble, man. And every president since then has not crossed that line.
Westmoreland said it best. And Westmoreland was a decorated hero. But Westmoreland said it best. He actually indicated that because Kennedy refused to work with him on talking about the pros in terms of just making sure that there's an accumulation of soldiers in Vietnam. One of the things that people don't understand is when John F. Kennedy started out actually trusting the military. But then something interesting happened. It was called the Bay of Pigs.
Yeah, that I didn't even have anything to do with.
Yeah.
All this stuff was in place before I even got in office.
And if you want to talk about the actual coup that took place in South Vietnam, that took place as well under JFK's watch. And after those 2 occasions, after the Bay of Pigs, and again, the CIA told him, look, these are trained operatives, and they weren't. They were Cuban refugees. And a lot of people from any demographic can relate to this. Imagine coming to this country and actually wanting to stand against a very, very aggressive regime that you were against back home, and you're being taught and trained by the CIA and being told that you're doing a really good job and you're ready to get dropped down to Cuba and hold your own government coup and then get slaughtered on your own beach. Yeah. This is what the CIA pretty much advised Kennedy, told him that if he were to proceed forward with this, then Castro would probably be shaking in his boots. So it was a failed mission. Ideologically, it probably hurt the country even more. And from a morale standpoint, no one even in office, even McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense at the time, even condoned this act. So Kennedy had a reason to distrust the military. But
look, brother,
you better believe that if you want to look at who runs this country, the storyline, the narrative is the president. But it's never been. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, there's always said if a military coup or a coup period ever took place in this country, who would be the leader of it?
You mean today?
Yes, the CIA.
Well, of course. I mean, they have vested interest. I mean, if you think about why there would even be a need to have one.
But let me ask you this. Why would John F. Kennedy even consider what you brought, consider what the military people are saying when it came to Cuba, and you came up with Operation Northwoods? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't, though. He did, and I agree. I want you to expand on that. He didn't, but he had no choice. And the reason why he had no choice was because he was already fighting them. If you think about exactly what happened in South Vietnam, there was a coup over there as well. He had no leverage anymore. He had to sort of disagree on one end and then agree on another stance. and it was playing a delicate game. It was just balancing because he knew he still needed the military.
Right.
He couldn't disagree with him in general on every issue.
But I think I think when it comes to JFK, a lot of stuff he inherited it, and a lot of stuff he was lied to about.
Of course, from Eisenhower. Sure, you're right.
A lot of stuff he was lied to about. That stuff had been in, since Batista was ousted, things were in place. We got to get this back. First of all, the mob is in with the FBI.
Right.
Everybody
you're right about that. What were they?
Everybody making money off this, right?
Oh my goodness, Cuba, and you're right, Stevie. And this is one of the things I see my sponsor nodding. This is one of the things over here that I have to give you a lot of credit for, because you're digging in really deep, my friend, and you're actually clicking on all cylinders. You really are. Batista, when you talk about the Batista regime in Cuba prior to Castro, it was probably one of the most hotbeds that any American tourist can visit at that point.
Hey, brother, dude, back in those days,
yep,
that was Vegas before Vegas.
Absolutely, it was.
Millions.
It was.
We're not going to even get into how much money Europe and America was making off the sugar. We ain't going to get into that.
Oh no, of course.
Come on, bro.
An economically rich country that used the foundation. Yes. They used the very foundation of their agricultural system better than any other country did.
Yes.
Sure enough, their neighbor is the big old powerful United States of America.
Yeah. And then this Italian dude come in here and say, hey, look, brother, you know what I'm saying?
Y'all love Stevie Ray, guys.
And hey, dog, I'm an attorney by trade, brother. So I really know a little bit of something about what's going on around there. I don't like it, baby. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't like it. You know what I'm saying?
It's exhausting when you kind of try to put the parallels together, because most people want a quick, simplified answer, but they're not going to get one.
No,
they're not going to get one. I love your analogies too, because you're hitting home runs there. But
I mean, look, I got a little mob mentality in me too. You dig?
Sure, I get it.
So that's what I say. I mean,
talk to me about those. Since we're talking about this era, talk to me about what your opinions are. I wanted to talk about someone in particular from this era in the U.S. Someone who was considered a celebrity back then, and a lot of women idolized her. What are your thoughts about Marilyn Monroe as it pertains to her connections with JFK? From what you heard, from what you've gathered.
I think Marilyn Monroe. My opinion, I really like Marilyn Monroe movie, man. I tell you the one movie that I really like.
I know. Can I guess it?
Go ahead.
7 Year Itch.
7 Year Itch.
No.
That's it.
That's it. Yeah. Great movie.
7 Year Itch, man. Great movie, bro.
Yep.
Great movie, man. I mean, every time I watch that movie, man, it's like starting all over again, man.
Sure.
And I think, politicians, come on, man. Those politicians, brother, they love them to Marilyn Monroe, bro. I
got a very disturbing image that my students will never know that's entrenched in my mind. Years ago, I read that the biggest womanizer in the Oval Office was Lyndon B. Johnson. And when that image came to my brain, I was scarred forever. I'm so nothing against, we're not shallow people. We don't judge looks. But the picture of Lyndon B. Johnson just having sex just scares me. The same way with Cheney was kind of like a go-getter with the women. So
I can believe Lyndon B. Johnson, bro.
Can you really?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, what, the Southern Charm? Is it the Southern Charm kind of thing?
I mean, come on, man. Lyndon B. Johnson kind of look like a pimp to me, bro. You know what I'm saying? He's like it's all. Hey, look. Okay, Lyndon B. Johnson is the only politician that we know that had his own personal hitman. Okay, all pimps got a side guy that takes care of his business, right or wrong.
Extremely right.
That's the pimp game, bro. Okay.
I thought of it that way. You're right. Lyndon B. Johnson, and by the way, I'm looking at my sponsor. This should be the tag of our video. Lyndon B. Johnson was a pimp.
My I'm saying? They don't mind talking to me about, how inquisitive I am. If I met you and you worked in the White House, hey, we cool, but eventually the question is coming.
Right.
Eventually, I'm gonna ask something. You didn't give me your cards. Hey, give me a call. We can have sometime. You don't think I'm gonna ask you about your business because you asked me about mine.
Right. You're right.
So I've been in those circles. So when it comes to stuff like that, brother, that goes on a daily basis, and we all know it. We just don't want to look at politicians as like they're regular people.
We don't.
But they are.
We don't.
We just don't want to believe that, and it goes
but
back
it's
to...
not just, I guess it's people of authority that we respect, or we should, because when I was a kid, being a teacher now, of course, but when I was a kid, I never thought teachers had personal lives. I thought they lived in the school.
And I think that same mindset goes for politicians, and I think that same mindset is one of the reasons why Donald Trump can get away with what he get away with, because I think his following doesn't look at him like a politician. They look at him just
like a really good point. That's a really good point. That's a damn good point.
I'm gonna tell you right now, it's no way any politician would have survived a tape of a man saying, "I grabbed them by the this, that, and the other." They would have ate him alive.
Absolutely.
They would have ate him alive. Or a porn star, or a Playboy playmate. Right. They don't care, because that's the guy next door. Whereas we look at a guy like, what was the guy named Brown out in California?
Yes.
Some years ago. Okay, somebody seen him on a boat with somebody. Over.
Yep.
Over.
Just like that. Yep.
What was the guy named a few years ago that did I guess he had an affair with his biographer or something like that?
It's funny that you bring that up, because we had this conversation. But the other thing that I find interesting, too, is that if you're talking about taboo issues that should make, I guess, just should probably shun a fellow politician in terms of his actions. The interesting thing about that, you're right, is when it comes to Trump, he was untouchable. It almost seemed like anything the guy did, as malicious as it was, as controversial as it was, it only riled up his cult-like following even more.
And I honestly believe that is why Donald Trump is in office. He was put in office after 8 years of Obama. 8 years of Obama was people loving people and kind of coming together, and so on and so forth. The African American in the White House. Maybe we can have better. Maybe we can have better race relations. So what do you do to blow that up? You drop a nuclear bomb in the middle of it to blow that up, and a person that actually relishes racism, a person that actually relishes racism, a person that actually relishes nationalism, a person that actually says this, that, and the other, and won't even shake a black man's hand in the middle of a crowded room. So then you get the base that's got inverted racism and systemic racism inside them. Man, I ain't been able to use this in a long time. Some good racism. Oh, I'm gonna let it out. And we got the social media thing, buzzing like it is, and that's where we are right now. Don't ask me. Just look at it for yourself. This is not an accident.
First, you used to actually kick someone out the front door. Now it's almost like there's a tug of war where some people are trying to get someone out of the front door if they've committed a controversial act, while the other side tries to pull them back in because of it.
But you got to have the right guy to do it.
Yeah, you do.
This would not work with a career politician, because a career politician, hey, say what? I'm not going to say anything toward Charlottesville when it comes to Aryan Nation and Nazis doing what they did. I'm not going to say nothing negative toward that. I'm going to get out and say, hey, man, it was both bad people on both sides. Blah blah blah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's not socially something that's in the conscientious of the public as much as it should be.
Exactly.
By the way, we were talking about the gay relations and all that, and the hypocrisy there, but nobody blamed Bill Clinton for having a gay relationship.
I never knew he had one.
Yeah, he would always touch Hillary Clinton's penis.
Hey man, look, dog. I mean,
I'm just facts are facts. I'm just saying.
Hey man, I'm trying to figure out, man. That you already talked about Donald Trump's hair, okay?
Yes, I did.
Now you're talking about Bill Clinton, the ultimate Mr. Dope Man. So,
I'm just saying, like, do you kind of like, I mean, I know it was his choice. Nobody forced him to marry Hillary, we'll say. But, it's kind of have that extra bit. It's not like you were married to somebody who would keep you.
Now you're talking about Bill Clinton. Now you're talking about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton. Come on, man.
Slick Willie. I got nothing against Slick Willie. No,
I can't tell.
The only thing I guess I would say, it's kind of a little point that I guess a little point of attention I have. The only thing is that, in 1999, he did kind of bomb Kosovo just to show Republicans that he's not a left-wing hippie because he was about to sell books in the year 2000 when he was stepping out of office for a second term.
Hey, I think he was bullied into that. I wouldn't be surprised if he was bullied into that.
Yeah, I would agree. It's it's only about 80,000 civilians that were killed in Kosovo under his watch. But I agree.
Yeah.
Users.
I just one wall we just couldn't stay out of, huh?
He was so close. He was at the finish line, too. He was so, if you want to use an analogy that's a bit entertaining, this guy's running like the 500, and he's right there. He's right about to cross the finish line. And in terms of a foreign policy standpoint, the guy had have a lot of blemishes on his record. And then he goes, you know what? I want to draw book sales, but Republicans aren't going to buy my books. Let me bomb Kosovo for no reason.
But you also remember he was going through the Monica Lewinsky thing, too.
Yes, he was. And he wanted to get this thing. He wanted to distract the public away from something. Away from that.
Man, he had to do
Poor Al Gore, because damn, Al Gore. If Al Gore didn't have Bill Clinton endorse him, you know what it was like behind the scenes. I'm going to give just sort of my entertaining stance on this. It didn't actually happen verbatim like this, but it was almost like Bill Clinton was like, "Hey Al, are you going to run?" And Al goes, "Of course I'm running on the ticket. Of course. Yeah, I want to support you." And Al's kind of like that friend that's really just a nice guy and goes, "No, Bill, it's okay. I kind of don't want you to, you've got your own problems. It's all right. I don't want to be associated with you anymore. No offense. We'll still talk on the phone." And Bill's like, no, it's okay. I'll help you. Trust me. And he's so enthusiastic, but he doesn't realize he's actually causing this guy the worst damage he can possibly cause anybody.
Unbelievable.
Unreal. Al Gore needed to shed the image of Bill Clinton so fast. The race shouldn't have been that close. People talk about what happened with W. Bush and Al Gore in the year 2000, and that's more, it's more of a recent thing that people know about. They talk about what happened in terms of the scandal. It shouldn't have been that close. People don't realize this. It shouldn't have been close to the election.
It shouldn't have. And they knew that. They knew if we can banish this man enough, he won't be next standing to this guy. They knew that.
No, they did. They actually did.
And it worked. We just got to be close.
Yeah.
We got to be close enough to win. Just like anything else, just like a football game. At the end of a football game, you just got to stay close. Because if you can stay close, I might can get that field goal with 2 seconds left.
That's a really good analogy.
Yeah, and
I agree.
good. But
let me ask you a question. This is a question that will never occur in our lifetime. I can almost bank on it. If some kind of you want to use the term alien, okay, some kind of alien from outer space arrives and knocks on your door and says, "Stevie, tell me one thing that's right about society, in your opinion, and one thing that's wrong about society." How would you answer that question? You could do either one first. It doesn't matter. What's good and what's bad.
The one thing that's right about society, that everybody actually believes in hope.
It's true. Wow, that's actually
true. That things are actually going to get better.
Fundamentally true. You're right.
Yeah.
Fundamentally true.
Everything that's wrong about society, those same people that believe that won't let it happen.
Right. I love that. The same people won't let that happen. The oppressors. Which group outweighs the other, Steve? Which group outweighs the other? Just to pick up your answer. They're the same, huh?
They're the same group.
Interesting.
I just think that's a fallacy that man has within himself.
So you're saying it's the yin and the yang?
Yes.
That's interesting. Do you subscribe to the school of thought that a lot of people need to fight for something, in the sense where I think a lot of the people who were protesting when Trump was elected, a lot of them really felt the need to sort of live up to their own parents' ideologies, where, the hippie movement, and there was so much to protest in the 60s and the early 70s. And I think there's a big of a generational gap where I think a lot of kids today felt like they sort of want to fight for something. I don't necessarily feel like I don't want to generalize because some people have a lot of legitimate issues that they want to fight for. But the interesting thing about the movements of today is whether you like Trump or not, one thing, if you disagree with me, please tell me, but one thing that I think was interesting is that despite the horrendous social opinions that this man made on a lot of various topics, before his feet got even warmed up to sitting in the Oval Office, there were riots already. From a speculatory standpoint, just in terms of just speculating exactly what would happen with him in power, it seemed as if there wasn't any patience. Back in the 60s, somebody asked me this. The difference in the movement of the 60s and 70s when there were riots and there were protests is that there was a backlash from something that was already taking place from a higher level.
Exactly.
Now it's almost like I think we've lost so much. People talk about how our attention spans are a lot less because of all these TV stations and technological devices, but also from a political standpoint, the margin of error has gone so slim. It's gone so slim where there's just no more patience to let anybody do his job. Not that he has or hasn't, but if you want to simplify what I said, then that's the best way to say it. There's no patience in allowing someone to show you whether or not he can do his job or not.
I think...
Not today. I'm talking about if we have to rewind back to when he was first elected.
I think when it comes to Donald Trump, like I said earlier, Donald Trump was, to me, one man's opinion, was put in office to do exactly what he's doing. Because you cannot, which is to separate.
Yeah.
Which is to separate and have people really concentrating on the real bull crap instead of concentrating on the real crap.
Right.
Because you got to realize.
You think that his kid gloves aren't even off yet. If he gets reelected, we'll see the real Donald Trump?
No. Because he's doing his job.
Right.
And see, this is the thing. If a career politician did what Donald Trump did and got in office, he'd be banished and he would never, first of all, he'd be impeached. And he will never be able to do anything in public office ever again. Ever. So you can't get a career politician to do what Donald Trump's doing. He got too much to lose. What does Donald Trump have to lose? Nothing. You know why? I'm just playing the game.
Sure.
Because I'm not a politician anyway.
Right.
And I'm already rich. So what can you take from me? In essence, everything this does because of how people look at celebrities today. I'm a celebrity living the dream. I'll be even
more of a sense of entitlement, pretty much.
I'll be an even bigger celebrity when I get on with this, and y'all can have this back. And actually, what it shows is that's pretty much a indictment on America.
Not what I can do for my country, what I can do for me.
That we are. When something like this happens in our government, and this person like this who believes in what he believes in, and behaves the way he acts, and people actually adore it, it comes to me, and I will say this: I actually believe 100%, undoubtedly, that I actually believe in that we are the dumbest fucking country on earth.
Stevie, you've been around the world.
I actually believe
cultures, and you're someone that has a strong opinion about that because you also have a lot of world travel experience. In my opinion, it's interesting you say that. I definitely think that our youth might be considered ignorant because if you think what's ignorant, what's the difference in your opinion? What's the difference between stupidity and ignorance?
I'm talking about at this day and age.
Yeah.
And we fall for this okie doke. The experiment has worked.
Well, what if somebody tells you the same thing about Reagan and says we fell for his charm as well? Are you going to say he had a lot more experience?
Ronald Reagan, you know what I'm saying? I didn't agree with a lot of things Ronald Reagan did. But at the end of the day, the man still was a politician.
What I'm saying. If it wasn't for the gloom and doom associated with Trump, forget Donald Trump. Let's take a carbon copy of someone else who had no experience and call him Joe Schmo. Forget Donald Trump. Against someone having no experience in that particular position.
To be honest, AB, it's going to be hard for me to do that. It's going to really be hard for me to do that. I don't think it could ever take place in any kind of way, shape, or form. Because people used to talk about Jimmy Carter in that way. You know, when Jimmy Carter came up.
From humble beginnings as well.
Yeah, he was the government before that. And I don't have anything against anything like that because he ran, he won. And the man was a decent president, but he had the whole world, especially this whole country, against him. And the things that happened in Iran didn't help. You know, the economy.
Yeah, the Iran hostage guys just kind of killed him, if you think about it.
Didn't help, but the man was a genius when it came to foreign affairs. And nobody can take that away from him. You know,
he botched the Iran hostage crisis, but besides from that, what made him a genius, especially in terms of what the policies that were set in the Middle East, he bridged the gap in the Middle East.
Yes, he did.
He helped. People don't know about what happened in Camp David, but look it up. I mean, he definitely bridged the gap there.
You know, but didn't matter. One of them who was that still got his head blown off. But be it as it may.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah, but be it as it may. I mean, I've never been a big advocate of politics. And anybody that knows me knows that.
You don't have a master's degree in education?
Excuse me?
Are you sure you don't have a master's degree in education? It doesn't mean anything. It's a piece of paper, but you sure you
don't? No, man. I'm a college dropout.
Hey, listen, you're not a life dropout because I'll tell you what, you sure don't know how to grab life by its horns and say, look, take me for a ride. Because you're really, I mean, the interesting thing is that everything you're talking about, from someone who's come again, you know, this is just me being humble, but at the same time, this is a passion of mine. I've been studying my whole life. I can honestly tell you, if somebody just introduced me to you after this conversation, I probably would have said, yeah, this guy has a master's in education. I mean, was my first thought. My first instinct would be to make a claim like that. Honestly speaking,
I appreciate the sentiments, but I'm kind of self-educated. Through a lot of just hanging around at the library to just get out the heat.
You know what the kids ask you, though, Steve? What if the kids ask you, this is so interesting, because let's bring it back to the kids. When I say kids, it could be any age group. What if the kids approach you and say, Stevie, I definitely want to make a difference in the world. I want to enter the political arena. And I hear you talking about this stuff on, you know, wrestling with history. I like the show. What advice would you give them? It's a general question, but what kind of advice would you give them?
I would tell them do the same thing my older brother did, who was a school valedictorian and went to school and graduated in 3 years and was a political science major, and try to learn as much about real history as you possibly can.
Right.
And try to learn as much about, you know, depending on what your background is, try to learn as much about your people as you possibly can. Because this political game, man, it's a work, man.
If you had the chance to go back, you can just kind of like go back and maybe enter the arena yourself when you were younger. Knowing now, if you knew then what you know now, you think you would?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I never really thought about it. I've had so many people, Avery, this is no joke.
No, please.
I've had just talking to people, I don't know, the last few years or so many people have actually, man, you should go into politics.
Right.
Just different friends of mine and people I've talked to. Man, you should go into politics.
Okay, so fundamentally, from an idealistic standpoint, I would agree. But from a consider you a friend, I don't want to see you drive yourself nuts standpoint, I would say no.
Oh, no. Oh, no way. No way. I remember I made a bet with my ex-brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Years ago, and I lost a bet, and I had to go down and work with him on the Obama campaign here in Houston when Obama was running.
Yep.
And I didn't think Obama had a chance, so I went out and did it because I lost a bet. And he became president. Now I regret the fact that I ever worked for the guy because I think he was horrible as a president.
From a foreign policy standpoint, or just all in general, all in all?
This guy's nothing but a puppet and a figurehead. This guy's, you know, sending missiles from afar to blow up people.
Was the Iran deal something you looked down upon too?
That you think might be a terrorist. I mean, he did more against immigration. People think Donald Trump is bad on immigration. This guy was even worse. Well, and when it comes to that,
if you want to talk about the first few months when he was elected,
I don't want to talk about this punk at all. But that's just me.
No, I'm with you. I respect that. All I'm going to say is, if you think about it, the interesting thing about race, and it's so interesting, is that a person who truly does care about, just from a humanitarian standpoint, about people in general. This is why I love talking about Martin Luther King, because people don't understand. Martin Luther King Jr. was colorblind. They don't get that.
Exactly. And that's the thing people don't understand. Everything that he was talking about was the betterment of man in general.
Mankind, thank you. Mankind is the words people ingrain that in your minds when remembering him. Mankind. And when the public wants to propaganda you and use propaganda to brainwash your brains and let you know, hey, look, you should support Martin Luther King because A, it's a holiday, you get a day off of school, and B, all these commercials plugging athletes or people of interest, entertainers that are going to make a big deal about him on that particular day makes you shed a tear on that particular day. But if you really want to do something, don't just feel the need to get emotionally attached to an issue on that particular day. Do your due diligence.
Right. But nobody does anymore.
And nobody cares.
Nobody does anymore. And that's one reason, if you really think about what this guy stood for, they have to kill it. They can't let it grow. Because it's too inspirational to let it grow. We got to kill it.
Wait. I want to hear what you just said. It was too. You said his message overall was too inspirational. That's interesting. I agree with it. Today. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because not only is it inspirational to African Americans, which is a given, it's inspirational to anybody that really can see it and let it, bloom inside their heart. And you come out a better person. And I want to be a better person. I just got
a note here that says Stevie Ray is blowing it up today.
What was that?
I mean it. I'm not being trivial or exaggerating. I got a note that said Stevie Ray is blowing things up today. In a positive way. I mean, I got a thumbs up. I mean, look, we're not doing this. Hey, Stevie's being Stevie. This is how he feels, and I agree. He's giving a thumbs up in terms of, this is entertaining. I look at it as being entertaining, but I also look at that as being very factual. Maybe that's why it's entertaining, is because it's so factual.
Well, and that's what I'm talking about. That guy, you got to be stopped.
Yeah.
You got to be stopped.
Right.
And like I said, when people got that kind of aura about them, they make people feel good about themselves. And you can't deny when you make somebody, when a person that has been trained to hate you starts to follow you and believe in you, you're the most dangerous person in the world, according to the FBI leader, J. Edgar Hoover.
Yeah,
That's what he was talking. That's what he was talking.
I think what bothers you too, Stevie, is that he was never held. I'm talking about Hoover. That he was never held accountable for those comments.
Exactly.
You're talking about from an accountability standpoint. You have an issue with that, and you have a justified issue with that.
Exactly.
So
J. Edgar Hoover as far as I'm concerned, was as guilty as killing Martin Luther King as if he pulled the trigger himself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. You're talking about a very turbulent time where people didn't necessarily feel as if the general consensus of mankind itself would back Martin Luther King. When he started to gradually, and he started seeing Jewish people walking alongside Martin Luther King and rabbis, he started seeing Muslims who, again, people automatically assumed that Muslims were militant in the 60s. Not all of them. Yeah. There was a sector, but not all of them. And I think
I think people are not talking about your everyday Muslim. I think they're talking about the black Muslims.
Right. Even then, there were three different sectors.
Exactly. But the black, that's a whole nother story for another show.
Story. Lou Alcindor actually had who became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Lou Alcindor was part of a very peaceful sector that had what people called a bad apple or two, that were very violent and militant, even though, again, that's a whole different conversation because maybe they had a reason to be violent and militant to begin with.
Right.
They were actually killed. They were killed in his house.
The thing is this, though. Black Muslims was not violent unless it called for. What they were protectors. The black Muslims never did anything just for the hell of it.
Right.
But that's how the media portrayed them.
Sure.
But
almost in the sense of how dare you stand up for yourself from a physical standpoint and do something about it? How dare you?
I mean, Huey P. Newton and those guys were some of the most intelligent guys. Those were young. You realize how young those guys were?
They were young. They were young.
Do you realize how young those guys were?
Yeah, they were extremely young. And they were very organized at the beginning. They were very organized. They had a very, very strong objective in terms of what they wanted to get across. And what people don't understand is there wasn't this militant faction that said, we are going to loot, we are going to fight, we are going to inflict violence upon our fellow man. That wasn't the case. What the message was, if we're going to get pushed, we're going to push back.
Exactly. And it is our constitutional right to do so.
Yep, absolutely it is. Absolutely it is.
But then you had this little chick on the Blaze, Tommy Lauren, whatever her name is.
Yeah.
I wish I had been on that show when she had Charlamagne the God on there. Man.
But I've seen that actually. I've seen it.
Come on, Avy. Oh my God, brother.
I guess that answers my next question. If you had a time machine now, where would you go? I guess that'd be one of the spots.
Man, I was like, you let off.
I'll never get a chance to ask you this again, because you and I talk about so many different topics. I know that next week we're on for the next episode, and there's maybe some other stuff down the road that we'll delve into, but we're going to talk about so many different issues because there are no pauses, there's no breaks. It seems like you and I can talk about a million different things. So I want to ask you this while it's on my mind.
What's that?
And again, this is sort of just an entertaining question for some of the fans who might want to know. If you had a chance to step into a time machine, would you go backwards or forwards?
Wow, that's a good question, man. I would probably go backwards.
Particular time, maybe? Or...
I would love to see exactly and walk hand in hand, in lockstep with the movement. I would love to have been there in person, bro.
Any particular decade?
Like I say, the movement in the mid-'60s.
Yeah.
I would love to have been there in Selma and some of these other places, man.
It would have been inspiring, right?
I would love to see just how it feels when that kind of unity just takes over people. And people don't realize, and even my daughter, I used to tell her about this when she was little.
Yeah.
And it really made me proud when she started going to the library to get books and study about it when she was a kid. It really made me proud when she started doing that. But people don't realize, even African Americans of the day, and I was telling my daughter this when she was little, she's 24 now, how much people sacrificed to keep the movement going. Families giving money, giving support, letting people live at their houses. You know what I'm saying? Cooking the people meals, doing everything they could because everybody wanted it to succeed. That's saying something, man.
Absolutely.
That's saying something. A group of people all over the country are all backing this guy, backing this movement because he has to succeed. He has to. And do you know, you ask me right now, okay, you can't even get people to come up and stand up for what Colin Kaepernick did. Now, you ask me how many African Americans in this country will stand up and give a piece of themselves for a movement today.
That's a great point.
How much you willing to sacrifice? Because nothing gets done without sacrifice.
That's a great point.
If you're a soldier, you got to be ready to die for it.
Now, do you
how many people died for the movement? No, you're too comfortable now. How many did you see how Lou Alcindor and all Jim Brown and all these guys rallied around Muhammad Ali when he felt like he was being done wrong? Remember that?
Of course.
How many of them rallied around Colin Kaepernick?
None.
You see my point?
None. I mean, you brought up a really good point. I mean, back then, yeah, Lou Alcindor, Bill Russell. I mean, there were so many. And do you feel like, this is the question I want to ask you, do you feel like because of the fact that there was a mixed message, it began as a message about police brutality and injustice. That's how the whole thing started with Colin. And it got turned into something else completely.
And why did it get turned into something else?
Tell me, I want to hear your opinion.
Because the media hijacked the narrative.
Yeah.
Because they were all in on this. And we cannot let this be what it really is. Because if it is, that is too much like right, and we're telling on ourselves.
That's interesting.
So talk about the military. Talk about the military that's been over in Afghanistan fighting an unjust war that was brought up on a lie. And you got to come back with no arms and legs and nobody to take care of you. Talk about the post-traumatic syndrome because the guy done had 3 or 4 different deployments. You know, now he doesn't even know who he is anymore. And he comes back to Walter Reed and nobody gives a damn. But you can actually sit up here and act like at a football game that you're so into the military that the one guy that's on the corner, the guy that's on the corner from Vietnam or Korea or whatever that just wants a little change, and you look at him like he got shit poured on him. You kidding me?
You sent me goosebumps.
You kidding me?
Yeah, to be honest, you're hitting something.
You kidding me?
It's so close to home.
Then you want to act like you so patriotic when it's convenient. You got me fucked up, bro.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah. What you're saying is actually...
But my people dying in the street, unarmed black men dying in the street, and don't nobody give a shit? Man, you got me messed up.
Not just in the streets, but also in the jungles, because if you think about it, let's go back to Vietnam. Who are the men who were usually enlisted?
Exactly. Kids,
but let's be more specific.
African Americans?
Yeah. Especially in the latter years of Vietnam.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, exactly. Because of the chicken hawks of the world who always want to start a war for the financial convenience, and who do they send? The very person that you don't even consider a citizen in the first place.
I couldn't agree more.
Don't get me started, bro. Don't get me started.
I want to actually ask a question. Somebody walked into the studio now. Something really interesting as we entered the last phase of this episode of Wrestling with History with Stevie Ray. Hey, Jarrell, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I wanted to ask you about your opinion about this. The reason why I'm actually... You had a very interesting stance regarding the Colin situation that Stevie brings up.
Hey, what's going on, Stevie?
What's going on, the son of Jarrell?
Nothing much. Congrats, man. I watched the Hall of Fame speech.
Did you hear about
really
everything
cool.
Stevie was talking about?
Yeah, I was listening to the Colin Kaepernick part of it.
What's your take on that?
You know, it's funny because I agree with everything that was said. My only problem with the entire situation is because it was messed up that, you know, the man took a stand and then everybody turned their back on him. They blackballed him from the NFL. You know, he wasn't able to get a job. Like the president, for Christ's sake, he basically threatened. He was like, if any NFL owner hires him, that means they're not American or this, that, and the third, and like all this other bullshit. But the part that kind of disappointed me, and you know, and I think I said this to you once before, when all that happened, you know, Colin Kaepernick never actually said anything. Like he never did an interview. He never went down to a courthouse to speak on the situation. He kind of just like disappeared.
I love that point.
And there are a lot of athletes, even, you know, who were on his team. You know, they said that when the whole situation happened, like they wanted to ride for him and they were ready to, you know, they got juiced up and they were like, this isn't right. And they wanted to go down and they wanted to speak on it. They wanted to get together. And then the person who was the face of this whole thing disappeared. You know, he was nowhere to be seen. Like there were other politicians who went down to their respective courthouses and went down to, you know, to speak on behalf of of the social injustice and for the innocent people that were getting killed. And the one person who started the movement he disappeared. And then when we find,
do you think with Colin, I mean, if you're hearing it from that standpoint, which I think is a great point Jarrell just made, would you take an issue or an offense to the fact that Colin wasn't more engaged afterwards?
First of all, let me enlighten Jarrell on something.
Okay.
He didn't start a movement. He never said he wanted a movement.
True.
He was just talking about
True.
what he believed in and wanted to be brought to attention. That was the media, that was other players, that were other politicians that tried to start something.
That is true.
Don't put him in something that he never had anything to do with.
No, actually, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right about that. Because
the man said what he said.
Yes.
He said what he said, and it got taken out of context. Now, if he comes back and talks more to the media, you're doing nothing but giving them more fire to take out of context and turn into something else.
So you think being
silent, I've already said what I was protesting. Why should I want to debate it anymore?
Yeah. Okay. No, I can see that. No, you're right. I can see that point too.
Jarrell, do you feel like since he was thrust into it, whether he wanted to or not, due to the fact that what Stevie brought up in terms of the narrative the media was depicting, I mean, that's an interesting point.
No.
Do you feel like...
In essence, what I'm saying is this. That is what they wanted.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you, Steve. What I asked Jarrell is, though, if that is the narrative that the media sculpted to their image, their liking,
exactly.
Do you feel like, even though, and I want to get Jarrell's take on this, do you feel like, Jarrell, that because he was thrust into something he wasn't prepared for due to the media narrative that they preferred, that he had an obligation no matter what?
I mean, the only obligation you have in life is to yourself. So, I mean, to answer, because I see both sides of it, because Stevie's right. He actually wasn't trying to start a movement. Like, he just personally felt some kind of way. He took a knee. A reporter saw him taking a knee. They asked him about it. He just answered the question, and then the media turned it into something. I mean, me personally as an individual, if I saw that the media was taking this and running with it, depending on how I feel, I probably would have said something just to try to remove my name from the situation. But I can also understand why he would choose not to say anything at all either. You know, it just set a bad look.
What happened to an African-American child? What happens, and I'm asking you both this, what happens when an African-American child comes up to you, and you're Colin, Stevie, and you're Colin Jarrell, and I really want to know this. An African-American child comes up to you and says, I really wish you could have spoken more because I really believed in what you were saying initially, and I just wish you could have been more, more persistent in regards to the topic. How would you answer something like that?
And I'm gonna tell that kid, go sit down somewhere, and your parents will explain it to you. Okay? You're too young to be stay out of grown folks' business. That's what I'm gonna tell him. But at the end of the day, you're not bigger than the media. They can sculpt things the way they want to. That man was very deliberate, very deliberate as to what he was talking about, and not one single solitary media outlet ever addressed it.
No.
I even heard Will Kane come on First Take and try to blur the lines as to where the man was wrong at, that there are not more black men, subject to be shot by cops, this, that, and the other. That's not what he was saying. In essence, Will Kane, I will tell you this. You go take care of yours, and I'll take care of mine. What about that?
Right.
What about that?
There's no sense of obligation to all of a sudden, literally, really, if you think of the narrative of the media sculpted, you're saying there's no sense of obligation on Colin's part to actually ride that train because that was his intention to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, his intention was personal.
Well, what I need is to Colin Kaepernick to come out and talk to you. Forget you, man. The hell I'm gonna talk to you about? You one of them. So what I'm going to talk to you about? You've already taken what I said and turned it into something else. Have at it. But I know the truth.
What's your take, though? And I want to ask you both this, and this is something Jarrell had spoken with me about. I spoke with him about this. And again, starting with you, Jarrell, what's your take on, again, being an African American who was raised in Far Rockaway, Queens your whole life, Jarrell? Mm-hmm. What is your take on whether it's athletes, whether it's executives, the whole probing incident of a lot of people being caught on the phone making racist comments, Donald Sterling, the Hulk Hogan's, and do you feel like the accountability should be more held on a person's beliefs to say, well, I shouldn't be tapped in. I shouldn't have anyone probe my private conversations because, technically speaking, a lot of states would disallow that. Or do you feel like if you got your hand caught in the cookie jar, there should be some accountability? Which Jarrell, which do you think should be something that's much more prevalent?
But in this particular situation, it's really moral accountability versus like legal accountability. Because in the whole, you brought up the Hogan situation. In the Hogan situation, and I've said this a million times, he should have won that court case because his human rights as a human being, they were like they were taken away from him. He was illegally recorded, and he deserved to win that case. The problem is, from a moral standpoint, we all heard what you said. So although I support the fact that you were wronged, I'm just not going to flat out ignore what I heard. You know how like in the court where they say, "Oh, will the jury please disregard that last statement?" It's kind of hard to do that. But it becomes a personal choice. At that point, it becomes a personal choice. Are you like, how affected are you by what you heard come out of this man's mouth? Because
I'm sure you feel the same about Donald Sterling too. The same issue with him, the former Clippers owner.
I mean, it's the same, but it's the same.
It's a similar case.
It's the same situation. But I mean, so if Donald Sterling sued that Asian girl for illegally recording him, yeah, he should win the case. But you own a team. You have a board of directors. They should have removed him because at the same time, they're just like, you know what, you were wronged. But now that we know how you really feel, we can't allow you to continue to own this basketball team, which is dominated by African American people. Because he's like,
it's a sensitive topic. It's a sensitive topic. That's why I asked you both what you thought about it. But it's a sensitive topic.
I don't remember exactly how you worded it. What did you ask exactly?
Well, I mean, my question was, and Jarrell brought up the moral issue, which I commended. I applaud him for that. It's actually really interesting. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion was, if you really want to look at it from two ways, privacy protection is something that people are entitled to. Absolutely. We talked about Hoover. Obviously, in his mindset, he didn't quite agree on that. But privacy protection is something that we earn the right to have as citizens. Now, someone gets his hand caught in the cookie jar, and I brought up Donald Sterling and Hulk Hogan as examples. But when someone gets their hand caught in the cookie jar, do they have more of a leg to stand on when they want to make it an issue about their privacy protection? Or since they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, are the kid gloves off, and does the media and does the sponsors and does the public have a right to pretty much turn against them?
We talked about this earlier, and I will go back to this. The world is changing.
Yeah.
And now with things like this, with the social media world and everybody drumming it to the beat of 1,000 milliseconds, 1,000 beats a millisecond, however that goes, brother, it just gets embedded in people's mind, and then it becomes its own living, breathing organism. That's hard to fight. Mm-hmm. That's just hard to fight. And I just had a conversation with Hulk Hogan about that this past weekend.
Right.
I put Hulk Hogan in my speech.
Yeah, I heard that. Speech. Yeah, you thanked him because you specifically said he told the guys in the back, you should push this team because they're the best tag team that you have in the business.
Right. Okay. And I've got 50,000 questions when that thing went down with Hogan. I'm like, dog, people are people. And that's a lot. If you heard me, how I talk sometime in the confines of my own home, you might not think very highly of me with some of the things that I've said in the past. And so when it comes to Hulk Hogan, I can put myself in that position. Yeah. Now, with Hulk Hogan being a Caucasian and I'm being white, okay, it is what it is. But I know the man personally. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. And a lot of other African Americans know the man personally. Everybody got a little bigotry in them. Everybody. That's how we built. So if anybody thinks it's 100% gone on a daily basis, you're wrong.
I'll make some wrong. I am.
Wrong. Be that as it may, brother.
I am.
Be that as it may, if that's what you believe, that's fine.
That's the only thing I'll brag about. That's the only thing I'll brag about.
But you know,
like I said, if that's what you believe, that's fine. Mm-hmm. The human mind can actually convince itself of anything if it believes it's hard enough. Yeah. That is fact. But going back to what I was saying about Hulk Hogan, okay, he said what he said. He apologized for it. And, hey, man, let's move on. Because that can be a black man or a white man saying some of the craziest stuff in the world like that. That don't make him a racist. That just make him using racist terms. But at the end of the day, a racist to me is when somebody that's in a position of power, like a Donald Sterling, and they use that position of power and think that they're better than other people. Listen to what that man said. Listen to what that man said. I give him this. I give him this. I make the money. I pay him. Okay, that's an elitist. Mm-hmm. Right? That's an elitist way of looking at things. And by the mere fact, that elitist state of mind can be any race, creed, or religion when they get to that status.
True.
It just enhances what's already in you.
Mm-hmm. See, but the part about
another thing, hold on a second.
Okay.
And another thing I got to say about Donald Sterling.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. First of all, dog, you ain't even up on your pimp game, bro. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna hold that against him more than anything, dog. You not even up on your pimp game, bro. You know. Your pimp game.
Wait. I gotta interject myself here. I really do.
What's that?
Are you trying to tell me that LBJ had a better, stronger pimp game than Donald Sterling?
LBJ had his pimp game together, bro. LBJ got your pimp game together. LBJ had somebody that took care of all his problems. You dig? Donald Sterling, what was his right-hand man? He's supposed to take care of your pimp game when it's not in check. You know what I'm saying? So Donald Sterling, I gotta give him an F on the pimp game, dog.
Jarrell, you gotta take this.
You gotta know your role, bro.
Is there a rebuttal on that, or do you agree?
Nah, I mean, I agree with that. I think I definitely agree with that.
Come on, man. You got
it. Both you, Jarrell, or just the Sterling thing?
No, your wife is not the one to bring you down. Come on, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he got caught up. He got caught up.
Supposed to bring you down on that because you got to split all the money with her anyway.
Yep.
So your take on what Stevie's saying in terms of just the rebuttal or lack thereof would be that you agree on both stances, both the Donald thing and the whole thing.
I mean, the only two. I mean, the two biggest similarities in the situation, because like Stevie said with the Donald Sterling thing. You know, when he was saying like, wow, like I do this for them, I give them this, I give them that, you know, which is like it triggers a bunch of people. I mean, in Hogan's situation, the part where he says, if you're going to marry one of them, quote unquote, you should marry one that's worth millions of dollars. That's the only part where I was like, wow, really? You know, like tell us how you really feel. But
wait, so you're telling me that comment also sort of puts the whole elitist aspect of it attached to it?
I mean, that was the one aspect of it that like made me go like, holy cat, you know, because it was just like, you know, it was like the equivalent of you know, to me that one particular line was the equivalent of Sterling.
I have a question for you, Jarrell. I want to play devil's advocate. And Stevie's here and he's listening. You've known me for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Stevie said something interesting. Everyone's had a thought. Everyone's had, you know, we're humans. So we have the brain can convince you otherwise, right? Stevie, that's what you said. The brain can convince you whatever it wants, right?
Right.
Jarrell's known me for a long while. Have you ever, you know, noticed a glimpse of any type of prejudice in my body?
No.
Or in my brain? Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question. Devil's advocate. What if I come out? What if I'm recorded right now? And I'm looking right now at we're doing this interview. I'm going to go ahead and say, what if I came out, which will never happen, what if I came out and was caught, like my hand was caught in the cookie jar and I said something similar to what either Donald Sterling or Hulk Hogan said? Wouldn't you feel, from your standpoint, that you would be more quick? It'd be quicker for you to forgive and understand because you know me?
It's because I know you.
Or would it actually hurt you more because you know me?
I mean, initially it would hurt me more, but because I know you, that's why I would talk to you about it. And
so taking a personal bias away from this is something that's not necessarily easy when you know an individual.
Yeah, I mean, you and I had this conversation right after the Hall of Fame because I said to you, I was like, yeah, Stevie. I said the Harlem Heat, the Harlem Heat, portion of the Hall of Fame was really good, and I told you, I said, Stevie Ray thanked Arn Anderson, and I specifically said he thanked Hulk Hogan. And I said I have no problem with the fact that he thanked Hogan because he knew Hogan, he was with Hogan back in the day, and if Hogan did a favor or like helped him or put in a good word for him and did something, that helped his career, why would you not want to thank somebody for that regardless of anything that happened after the fact? Like I can never feel the same way Stevie Ray feels about it because I've never met the man.
Okay.
So like if Stevie Ray was to say like,
and I can understand that, but you got to realize people like Hulk Hogan at the time of which he came up in the 60s and stuff like that, racism is probably embedded in his soul, man. And I ain't gonna say I don't know how deep, but it's probably embedded in his soul, and he's dealing with trying to and deal with that as he grows older and as he becomes a young man and on and on and on. That still don't mean it was never there.
Yeah.
But just like on an everyday basis, I have to get up and go out and deal with things on a daily basis, knowing my oppressor is out here and there's people that hate me just because of what I look like.
Yep.
Right. If that makes sense. And I have to deal with my discretions every day as to what I want to say to somebody that doesn't like me just before I look like.
Both of you are African American, so tell me if you think this is the right portrayal. Coming from someone who's not African American like me, someone who's not African American.
Right.
The black struggle, in my opinion, tell me if I'm wrong, because you guys would know a lot more than I do. The black struggle is the fact that no matter where you walk, you can walk in a prevalent area of white people, you can walk in a prevalent area of black people. No matter where you're walking, the fact of the matter remains that if you're walking in an area where demographically speaking, your ethnic group or your color isn't exactly the popular consensus of what the public surrounds you by, they're going to look at the color of your skin, whether they have a racist bone in their body or not. The black struggle is you're going to be looked upon differently in an area where your demographic isn't prevalent. Is that correct?
I actually believe that.
Yeah.
And every day, but people are learning to deal with it on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And that is what Martin Luther King was talking about. Yeah. Don't be so prejudgmental.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because we've all had the situation where it's
still in people, and they have to deal with it on. It might want to come up, then you got to suppress it. It's kind of like being a drug addict or a drunk. You know what I'm saying? It's there, oh man, but I gotta suppress it because I'm not like that, and I don't want to be like that. But if something been telling you to be like that your whole life from childhood, every textbook that you read, every conversation that you hear, and you on that side of the aisle, it's in you. Mm-hmm. You just have to work with it to get it out. And the day that happened with Hulk Hogan, it came out.
Yeah, yeah.
But that don't mean he don't deal with it on a daily basis. Because if he was a real racist, he would have never helped me.
Yeah, Then there's that, and I also bring up the
and I'm just one African American that speaks highly of him. There's a whole lot of other ones, you know what I'm saying? But I can say the same thing about other people that are Caucasian. That don't mean they ain't never said nothing verbally racist, but that don't mean they ever went out and tried to hurt nobody or disrespected them because they are black.
Yeah,
it's a big difference, right?
Did you happen?
I can tell you about certain people in my wrestling career that was straight up did things like that and tried to hurt people because they was in a position to do so because that's the way they are.
Yeah.
And now they're born again Christians, so they don't do it anymore. But who was the most dangerous?
Oh well, now you just opened up a whole new can of worms. Sure.
Okay. Who's the more dangerous?
Evangelical right.
If you're hurting my career, you're hurting my family.
Are you talking about the evangelical right, Steve?
Regardless of who I'm talking about, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Think about that. I'm just giving you an example.
Yep. Look, when you're human, I agree with the one thing you said. You're inherently, you can't disable emotions. You can't disable thoughts. There's a lot of thoughts, and there's a difference between thoughts and actions. Now, if someone has a thought in their mind, the question is, does that equate to their actions? Because if they think it and feel like you could even do something like that, but just don't, it doesn't necessarily make them more innocent. It's just they didn't get caught.
or they're working on themselves.
Or they're working on themselves.
Everything is a work in progress. Nobody's just go, well, I'm not going to be a racist no more. Okay, I'm cool now. It don't work like that.
I brought in someone when I was in college. I brought in the person who actually played the lead character in American History X. I don't know if you guys seen the movie American History X. It's disturbing, starring Edward Norton. Good actor, Edward Norton. He plays a neo-Nazi. And he actually plays a neo-Nazi that, and the guy who he depicts is somebody I brought in. So he gets sent to jail. And his cellmate is an African-American. After 4 or 5 months, he denounces his entire neo-Nazi beliefs. He actually gets out of prison, and get this, not just verbally did he denounce them. He spent $8,000 of his own money to get some of those tattoos removed from his skin, from his body. So is reform possible? Yeah.
Well, of course.
If you work
In a capitalist society where money talks, and this guy literally took some money out of his account, and didn't do this for press. He didn't write a book. He wasn't on a media campaign. It took us a month just to get him down there to speak. This guy spent $8,000 of his own money to get some of those tattoos removed. It's a step in the right direction, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to want it.
Yes, because we all have to work on something, brother.
Yep.
Yeah. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine last night about, certain things in my life. I just had to look in the mirror because I have to make myself a better person. Not saying that I was a bad person, but it's certain things about me that I didn't like and I needed to work on.
Right.
And it could have been from the stress of the wrestling business. It could have been from, who knows, getting hit on the head with a zillion chairs. I don't know.
Sure.
But I had to look at myself and come to grips and say, you got to better yourself because this is not good.
Right.
And if I'm man enough to admit that and do that, it's no different from the person dealing with those kind of emotions. They're there. We've
hit a lot. We've spoken about philosophical point of views. We've spoken about political point of views. To me, I think that, in my opinion, if you have enemies, good. It means that you've stood up for something sometime in your life.
Good point.
Opportunity is missed by most people. It's dressed in overalls. It looks like work.
True.
Work. Get up and work. Unlike an anorexic sumo wrestler or lecturing stand-up comedian, put relevance in your work. Your work will pave the way. Don't you agree?
Yeah, of course.
That's the only thing I'm saying is, if I condemned everybody in a situation like Hulk Hogan, I wouldn't have any friends.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Black or white.
Well, I don't know if I can speak for Terrell because I want him to speak for himself. In my opinion, it makes you the bigger human being in that case.
You asking
more
me?
and more understanding.
I mean, look,
to me, I see tomato. I agree.
Now, in Donald Sterling's case, dog, it ain't no coming back from the Pimp Game, dog. I'm sorry. It ain't no coming back, bro.
He in trouble.
You gotta be Donald, huh?
Hey, dog, it ain't. I mean, come on, brother. You jump off. You let your jump off put you in the toilet.
Yeah, you're right.
Really?
You're right. Everybody else gets taken down by their wife finding out,
Now you heard Jarrell. That's how it's supposed to go.
Yeah, like you let the mistress bring you down.
You gotta keep your girls in check, bro.
Uh-huh.
I feel like if he wasn't 137 years old and senile, maybe he would have.
Dog, that's what I'm saying. You got to have your boss. I already gave you the JFK and that. I mean, the Lyndon B. Johnson.
Yeah.
I already told you what was up on that.
Stevie goes to the other side of the extreme and goes, keep your pimp game in check. Look what happened in Maryland. I get what you're saying, Stevie. I'm quick. I kind of know where the parallels you're making, but
come on, bro. Come on, man. I'm gonna have to do a whole show about the Pimp Game, dog.
He's saying Donald Stern's from Maryland Road, his chick.
The Pimp Game with Stevie Ray.
Come on, man.
Oh, I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
You remember what happened to Tiger Woods?
Oh yeah.
Okay, see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what happened. You know what I'm saying? That's what happens when you let it come home.
Yep.
That's when things blow up.
Yep.
It didn't even go home.
I'm going to leave you with this as we close. In my opinion, hey, to everyone listening, it's the weekend. It's upon us. Remember, if you got a party to go to and nobody says hello to you, don't worry about it. Just make sure that they say goodbye when you leave. That's all I got to say. Jarrell?
Yeah, definitely. It was a pleasure. Stevie Ray, again, love the Hall of Fame speech. You know, well-deserved. Definitely well-deserved. And I wish you nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you very much.